I mean, everyone pulls differently. So a lot of times, I don't really correct someone until I see them pull, and I'll say, all right, you're doing this, doing that. But I'll usually start some people with basics. So first, I'm in, like we were talking about earlier, I'm in like a running type shoe, cushy heel raised. We don't want that, so I'm gonna take these off. That's a common beginner mistake is lifting it in cushy shoes. It'll, one, pop you over the bar a little bit, and it also kind of feels an exaggeration, but it kind of makes you feel like you're on pillows. Unstable, which you don't want on deadlifting, you don't want on squatting. So either strongman, you can go barefoot, you can go in socks. So a lot of times when I deadlifted in contest, I would just go in my socks. Powerlifting, you can't do that, but you still want to be in a flat, barefoot type shoe. So I'll go over how I teach conventional, how I start it. So I think heels under my hips to start with. You might be better super narrow, you might be better a little wider conventional. It's up to you, play around with it. This is how I start people, is right here. And I have that bar kind of over the mid-foot level. I don't have it too close, certainly not too far away. So when I grab the bar, I want to think long arms. Big mistake people make when they deadlift is they jerk the bar off the ground and they bend the elbows and do this. If you're deadlifting with double overhand, maybe you do hook grip. If you're strongman, straps. You won't get injured as much doing that, but you are going to be losing strength that way. If you do it, if you're a powerlifter and you do a mixed grip and you do this, oh, you are going to tear a bicep at some point. I hate seeing that. Don't do that. Arms are straight. So always think long arms, and you're reaching as far as you can. When you do that, you should feel your lats turn on, which is really important. You want to keep that through the entire lift. So just for now, I'm going to just keep it double overhand. So I think long arms, I hinge down to the bar, I grab right to the outside of my knees. So another mistake is people going too wide, making your range of motion longer, which if you're doing a saturated deadlift, cool, you want to do that. But for normal deadlift, you want to be compact. Or they go in the way of their knees, making this bar drift out. So you want to be right to the knees here, squeeze the bar tight, arms are long, and then I'm going to take the slack out of the bar. That's probably the most common mistake in deadlifting is doing this, not taking the slack out of the bar. So when you hear that little click noise, I'm going to use the weight of this bar to pull myself in position. I like a head up position on conventional. Some people like to look down, up to you. I like to be right here, and I think about driving my feet through the floor, and my chest and my hips rise at the same time. So again, to keep going over common mistakes on a conventional deadlift, what people do wrong is they might start in a good position, and they'll do this. Hips come up, and they have this shaky deadlift or this lockout, and it's all low back, and their glutes don't fire. So you want them to rise at the exact same time. Take the slack out, get in position, get tight, feet through the floor, same time. Squeeze your glutes to the top. You can go if you have any.
Yeah, no, everything Matt said. The one, especially for women, again, we're a little bit smaller typically with our upper body. So for me and for other women, one thing I like to cue too is to have, because a lot of women, they've typically squatted a lot and they haven't deadlifted as much. So when they're going into the deadlift, they kind of almost make it look like a squat where they're overarching their back. And one cue that really works is to, I tell them to line up their armpits right over the barbell. And that's just gonna force them to lower their chest in the correct position rather than, I can't even really, I'm not flexible, but like to squat. Like they're like this.
So people are super flexible that can overarch like that. And
yeah, so with that, that's just one. Again, that'd be really hard for Matt because he already naturally is in the optimal position because of his mass and his upper body.
So quick question, Sumo, right? Years ago, I remember you writing an article, but also you kind of focused your training around getting better at Sumo to help you with conventional.
Yep.
What about that?
I've done that both ways. So
you pulled 800 both.
I've done 800. I've done 800 in competition. Sumo. I've done my best in contest was 765 conventional, but I have pulled 800 conventional in training. So when I was first shown Sumo long time ago, I was immediately better at it. I'm just built. I have long femurs, long arms, so I was built to pull Sumo a little more efficiently. But I made the mistake of not pulling conventional at all for a long time. So when I went back to conventional, I was terrible at it. But I wanted to do what I was good at, right? So I didn't train it. Once I got back into training conventional, I then didn't pull Sumo for a long time. I already had that ingrained. I was always better at it right away. So I built my conventional back up, got very strong there. And then one day I was like, let me pull Sumo, see how it feels. I ended up pulling 810 and like smoking it and it feeling way, way better because I brought up so many weak points. So I find people who pull sumo still pull conventional, bring it up, but people who pull conventional sometimes don't pull sumo, and they really should. It's like squatting. You want to do some squats in the wide stance, or some squats in the narrow stance. Bench pressing, do some close grip, do some wider stuff. You want to work in different angles to build up other muscles. So that one really helped me in both. So I like to switch back and forth between sumo and conventional and stay proficient at both of them for that reason.
So do you want to go over your setup for sumo?
Yeah, so sumo is kind of my bread and butter. Like I said, it just came natural to me. I have more flexible hips to get in that wider position. So I don't go super wide like some people do. The wider you go, the less your range of motion is going to be. But you got to have some very flexible hips to get all the way out there. If you guys see what this line is right here, eye line, I got my baggier pants on here, but you see I put my shin just to the outside of that line. Toes are out because I want my knees really going out. Some of these people doing sumo, they'll be toes more straight ahead, and the knees are here. When they start pulling, the knees collapse in. We want the toes out. Not way out, but we want them angled out like this. So that's my first step, is getting exactly, precisely even on the bar. Toes are gonna be out here, knees are gonna be driving out the whole time. Now, I always breathe at the top if I'm doing powerlifting, if I'm doing sumo. I don't generally use straps. So I breathe here, and I come down. As I come down, I exaggerate that knees out, and I grab right here, right even on that line. This is depending on how wide your shoulders are, but you want to be in a straight line down. People will sometimes go, I've seen this, people go too narrow, where we're going inside. That's gonna make you helicopter when you get locked out. So straight down, and then straight down, and then from here, it's gonna be the same. I'm gonna take the slack out of the bar. I'm gonna use the weight to pull myself in position, open the knees up real good. Sumo, I especially like to have a head up position, big breath, and I'm gonna start this by feet to the floor, but also I'm gonna think about leaning back a little bit. I'll even fall back like that sometimes, because you want that seesaw position you see from here. What people do wrong, sumo, is they try to pull conventional. So they end up doing kind of this, that same movement with the hips rising. You wanna think about this falling back motion. You think of a seesaw, you're using your body as a counterweight to go this way. You're gonna break the floor so much easier when you just get that slight lean back, get tight, slack out, and I'm gonna think with that little lean back. With 135, I can just get tight in the bar, and I'm not even really doing anything, just setting up, and I'll hover like that, and come up. So using yourself as a counterweight is huge there with that little bit of a lean back. Is conventional, you can muscle it up. You see different techniques on conventional that'll work for certain people. I feel sumo, the technique has to be so precise that if you mess it up at all at heavier weights, you're just gonna get glued to the floor.
And the patience factor on a sumo pull, you almost have to start building that tension for a little bit longer before it pops up.
You gotta be, everyone's got a weak point, but generally on sumo, it's gonna be a little slower off the floor. The lockout will be a lot faster. So you gotta grind it out a little bit more. Sometimes people, they'll go for it for a second, nope, can't get it. And you gotta grind. That's conventional too. You wanna grind to get it moving, but especially on sumo, it is a little harder to move off the ground. You wanna use your quads as much as you can by being more upright. But one thing to add, let's say you have a little trouble opening the hips up here. A great way to start is one, pulling in more of a moderate stance. You ever see Ed Cohn deadlift? He doesn't go wide. He's one of the best deadlifters of all time. He has a more of a moderate sumo stance. You might be better off starting here, and as you go along, going a little wider as you get better. Or you can start by putting blocks under here and pulling in that normal wide stance. And as you get better and more flexible, taking the blocks away.
So Matt wrote an article a few years ago now, right? About adding 100 pounds to your deadlift. We'll link it here to read the entire thing. But what would you say was the number one thing that helped you get that 800-pound pull on both conventional and sumo?
So, well, actually, it's funny. So, when I pulled 800 conventional, it was after preparing for the Arnold, where I used an axle to deadlift with, where the axle is not forgiving at all. There's no whip to it at all. I was using straps, but if you think about the axle, it's also slightly at a deficit, where I'm not grabbing here, I'm actually grabbing like this on the fatter bar. So it's a little bit more of a range of motion, and there's no whip to it. So those two things made it way harder for me. So when I went back to pulling on the deadlift bar, I was like, whew, this feels easy. And weights just were flying up when I pulled 800. When I pulled 800 at the meet, sumo, I had come from pulling conventional for a long time. I started, like I said, I was terrible at it when I got back into it, and I got my deadlift back up because I was preparing for a strongman show where you can't pull sumo. So I just pulled conventional, got it up to I think the low 700s, and then I decided to jump into a meet with I think I had 6 weeks of prep, and I was like, let's pull sumo, and then sumo weights were just flying, and at the show I pulled 800 with no problem.
So with deadlifting specifically, for a lot of our audience, they'll find that they keep kind of doing the same thing over and over and over, and it's not, their deadlift's not going up. Mm-hmm. What are some of the tips if someone's kind of plateaued on their deadlift that you would offer?
So anytime you have a plateau, you got to think about, what am I doing wrong? Look at your program, what's going wrong. You have to think, what are your weak points? So 2 weak points are always going to happen in deadlift. It's either off the floor or it's at lockout. Now, where it might be at lockout could be here, could be here, could be. The most frustrating thing I've ever seen is when someone can't lock it out right here, right?
Oh my God.
It's like you hate to see that. So you got to think, where am I having a problem? If you're having a problem off the floor, deficits are a great way to train that. People will sometimes go at too much of a deficit. I think 2 inches, inch and a half is plenty on a deficit deadlift. Those are great to use in rep range. You can pull heavy, you can pull for higher reps. I've done both with great success. If you have an issue at lockout, then going to blocks, go right where you get stuck and pull off blocks. It's gonna suck. It's gonna be super hard, but that's what you need. You gotta do the things you suck at, right? If another one if it's your lockout that helped me, actually I'm glad you said about my 800 deadlift. So when I pulled conventional working up, I actually missed 800 2 weeks before, and I missed it like right here. And I started doing pause deadlifts coming up. I would come up here, pause 1, 2, boom, and explode at the lockout. And that was a great accessory lift that helped me a ton and got my deadlift up.